Hey, it's Mark Lanier with your video thought for the day. Well, this is Black History Month, and one of the things that I'm doing is I'm looking at some of my favorite sermons by Martin Luther King Jr. and the way he used the Bible in those sermons. In 1967, he gave a sermon at the Ebenezer Baptist Church. I think that's in Atlanta. And the sermon was really pretty cool because what he did is he told that story about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, you may not remember who they were. They were three Jewish boys who were living in Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a king, as Martin Luther King said, who meant business. And when he said something, he meant it. And that's the way he was. So a decree was made that nobody was supposed to bow down to anyone except the king, and they were to bow down to him. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not going to have anything of it. And they refused to bow down to the king. And as a result, they got thrown in the fiery furnace. But beforehand, they were asked, hey, are you willing to bow? And they said, no, we're not going to. They said, look, as our God will save us from the fiery furnace. But if he doesn't, then he'll still be with us. It doesn't matter. We're not going to bow down to the king statue just because we're told to. And we're going to live our life consistent with God. And from this, King drew a couple of really good points that I think are instructive for you and me. The first point is an obvious one, and that is, doesn't matter who's telling us to do something. If it's contrary to God's law, we need to stick with what God said. Of course, King was the father of the civil rights movement in so many ways in America, and that was civil disobedience in its best form. Nonviolent, standing up for a higher law than the law that was there for the world at the time, or at least for Americans. But King made that point that you need to stand up and be accountable to God more so than accountable to men. And that's women too. So lesson one for you and I from that King sermon is a lesson that we put God and his instructions for us first in our life. He doesn't come second. He doesn't come third. He comes first. The second point that King made from that is also a dynamic point. It was that we should never doubt God and his power. God is able to do outrageously more, Paul said, than anything we can think or imagine. Don't ever underestimate God's power. It doesn't matter what you're facing in this life. You might be facing a fiery furnace. God has the power to see you through. And that brought King to his main point. He said, do you see in these three smart, religious, devout young men how they understood that we live in a world where God doesn't always bring us through. Doesn't always stop whatever it is going on. It's the phrase that King used on this was but if not, because that's what those boys said. They said, God's able to save us, but if not, we still won't do what's right, what's wrong, we'll do what's right. That but if not is incredible, because we may be living in the ifs, where God's saving us from misery, and life is good and life is great and all of the world's going just the way we want it. When that's the case, fantastic. But if not, if life is not so good and it's not going the way we want, and there is difficulty that we're incurring as we try to walk godly, we need to rest assured God will walk through that fiery furnace with us. See, God didn't save Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from going into the furnace. God saved them through the furnace. And he'll do that with you and me today if we'll remember to put him first, not doubt his power, and trust him for the consequences. And that's your video thought for today.